The island of Newfoundland, a rugged sentinel at the edge of the North American continent, has a story deeply intertwined with the great ocean that surrounds it. For centuries, its people have looked to the sea for their survival, their culture, and their identity. The story of the cod fishery is well known, a tale of hardship and abundance that defined the very soul of this place. But there is another story, one that speaks of even larger creatures and greater risks. It is the story of whaling, a chapter in Newfoundland's history written in the immense shadows of the gentle giants of the deep. It is a tale of human ingenuity, profound courage, and the often unforeseen consequences of our relationship with the natural world. This history is not a simple one. It is a complex tapestry woven with threads of survival, commerce, and tradition. The pursuit of whales shaped communities, built fortunes, and provided sustenance when little else was available. From the wind-swept outports clinging to rocky shores, brave men set out in small boats to face creatures many times their size. The whale was a source of oil to light the lamps of Europe, meat to fill hungry bellies, and bone for everyday items. Its presence in the cold North Atlantic waters was a promise of prosperity, a resource that seemed for a time to be as endless as the ocean itself. This is a story about people and their connection to these magnificent marine mammals. To understand Newfoundland, one must understand its relationship with the whale. This relationship began long before the arrival of large industrial ships, with the indigenous peoples who understood the rhythms of the sea. It evolved with the arrival of European settlers, who brought with them new methods and a growing global demand for whale products. The industry boomed, creating a unique way of life for those who lived by the hunt. The stories of these whalers, their families, and their communities are a powerful testament to the resilience and resourcefulness of the human spirit when faced with the raw power of nature. They lived a life dictated by the seasons and the migration of the great whales. Yet, this story is also a cautionary tale. It is a narrative that tracks the arc from abundance to scarcity, a journey that saw the great whale populations dwindle under the relentless pressure of the hunt. The very industry that sustained communities for generations ultimately threatened the existence of the creatures it depended on. This decline brought profound changes to Newfoundland, forcing its people to adapt once more. Today, the legacy of whaling lingers in the names of places, in museum artifacts, and in the memories of the old. It serves as a powerful reminder of our impact on the planet, and the importance of finding a new, more sustainable way to coexist with the giants of the sea. The story of whaling in Newfoundland does not begin with the large factory ships or the bustling shore stations of the 20th century. It starts much earlier, with the first people to inhabit this land. The indigenous peoples of the region, including the Beothuk and the Mi'kmaq, had a deep and respectful relationship with the ocean and its inhabitants. While they may not have hunted the great baleen whales in open water in the same way as later commercial whalers, they were resourceful hunters. They understood the patterns of the sea and would have made use of any whale that stranded on their shores. A stranded whale was a gift from the sea, a monumental bounty of food, fuel, and raw materials for tools. These early encounters were guided by a profound understanding of the natural world. The arrival of a whale, whether hunted in a smaller form or found beached, was a significant event for an entire community. Every part of the animal would be used with immense care and little waste. The thick blubber could be rendered into oil for light and heat, a precious commodity during the long, harsh winters. The meat provided a vast supply of protein, and the strong, flexible bones could be fashioned into everything from tools and weapons to structural supports for shelters. This was not an industry. It was a matter of subsistence, a relationship built on necessity and a deep-seated respect for the life that the ocean provided. The arrival of European settlers in the 16th and 17th centuries brought new methods and a different perspective. The Basques, renowned for their seafaring prowess, were among the first Europeans to establish a significant whaling presence in the waters around Newfoundland and Labrador. They brought with them centuries of experience hunting whales in the Bay of Biscay. Establishing shore stations in places like Red Bay, Labrador, they pursued right whales and bowhead whales with remarkable efficiency. Their methods were daring and dangerous, involving open boats known as chalupas and hand-thrown harpoons. The oil they produced was a highly valuable commodity in Europe, used for lighting, soap making, and processing textiles. This early European whaling was a brutal and demanding enterprise. The men would launch their small boats from the shore and row tirelessly into the cold, unpredictable waters of the North Atlantic. A successful hunt meant towing the immense carcass back to the shore station, a monumental task in itself. There, on the beaches, the blubber would be flensed or stripped from the whale and boiled down in large copper cauldrons called trypots. The resulting oil was stored in barrels and loaded onto ships for the long journey back to Europe. This was the beginning of the commercialization of the whale, a shift from subsistence to industry that would have a lasting impact on both the people and the whales of Newfoundland. As the centuries passed, whaling in Newfoundland evolved from seasonal European ventures into a locally rooted industry. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, modern technology had transformed the hunt. The invention of the steam-powered whale catcher and the explosive-tipped harpoon gun developed by the Norwegian Sven Foyn made it possible to pursue the faster and larger rorqual whales such as the fin and blue whales. These were animals that had been largely untouchable by the earlier whalers in their open boats. This technological leap forward sparked a new boom in Newfoundland's whaling industry, with shore stations springing up in coastal communities like Aquafort, Williamsport, and Hawk Harbor. For these small, isolated outport communities, the whaling station was more than just a place of work. It was the very heart of the local economy. In a place where reliable employment was scarce and often dependent on the unpredictable cod fishery, whaling offered a source of steady income. The industry provided jobs for dozens and sometimes hundreds of men. There were the gunners and crews on the catcher boats, the flensers who expertly carved up the carcasses on the slipway, the laborers who operated the machinery, and the coopers who built the barrels to hold the precious oil. The wages earned at the station supported families, fueled local businesses, and kept these communities alive. The whale was a source of immense wealth, not just for the station owners, but for the entire community in a more direct way. While the primary products were oil and bone, which were sold on the international market, very little of the whale went to waste locally. The meat was often distributed among the workers and sold cheaply to local families, providing a vital source of protein. In many households, whale meat became a staple of the diet, a familiar taste on the dinner table. Even the less desirable parts of the animal found a use. The leftover material, known as guano, was processed into fertilizer for gardens and farms, returning the nutrients of the deep ocean to the rocky soil of Newfoundland. This dependence on whaling created a distinct rhythm of life in the outports. The arrival of the first catcher boat of the season, towing a massive fin or blue whale, was a cause for both excitement and relief. It signaled the start of the working season and the promise of income after a long winter. The smell of the whaling station, a potent and unforgettable mixture of salt, oil, and industry, filled the air for miles around. The community's fortunes rose and fell with the success of the hunt. A good season meant security and a bit of comfort. A poor season meant hardship and uncertainty. The great whales, swimming in the nearby ocean, were the lifeblood of these coastal towns. The work of a 20th century Newfoundland whaler was a combination of modern technology and raw physical labor. The centerpiece of the operation was the whale catcher, a small but powerful steam-powered ship, typically around 100 feet long. These vessels were built for speed and maneuverability, designed to chase down some of the fastest animals in the ocean. At the bow of each catcher was the formidable harpoon cannon. This was not a simple hand-thrown weapon. It was a heavy gun that fired a massive iron harpoon weighing over 100 pounds. The tip of the harpoon was filled with an explosive charge, designed to detonate inside the whale, ensuring a quicker, though still brutal, kill. The hunt itself was a dramatic and dangerous affair. The catcher would patrol the waters, often for days at a time, searching for the telltale spout of a surfacing whale. Once a target was spotted, the chase was on. The ship's engine would roar to life, and the small vessel would surge through the waves, closing the distance. The gunner, the most skilled and highly paid member of the crew, stood alone on the bow, bracing against the motion of the sea. His job required immense skill, a steady hand, and nerves of steel. He had to judge the distance, the speed of the whale, and the rise and fall of the ship before firing the single decisive shot. Once the harpoon struck home, the struggle was far from over. The immense power of a wounded whale could tow the catcher boat for miles, pulling it through the water in what was known as a Nantucket sleigh ride, a term inherited from the old days of sail. The crew had to work quickly and carefully, playing the whale like a giant fish on a line, slowly winching it closer to the ship. Once the whale was exhausted and alongside the vessel, it was dispatched with a secondary lance if necessary. The crew would then pump the carcass full of compressed air to keep it afloat, flag it, and either leave it to be collected later or begin the long, slow tow back to the shore station. Back at the station, the work was just as arduous and specialized. The whale was hauled up a long, greasy wooden ramp called a slipway. There, a team of men known as flensers, armed with long-handled knives as sharp as razors, would begin the process of disassembly. They worked with incredible speed and precision, their boots spiked to maintain their footing on the slippery carcass. They would first strip away the thick layer of blubber in long sections. Then, they would cut up the meat and separate the massive bones. It was a factory line in the open air, a scene of intense, coordinated effort, turning one of nature's largest creatures into a collection of valuable commodities. Life for a Newfoundland whaler was, well, defined by hard work, long hours, and the constant presence of risk. The men who crewed the catcher boats faced the dangers of the North Atlantic every time they left the harbor. They contended with storms, thick fog, and the freezing cold. The chase itself was fraught with peril. A snapped line could whip across the deck with lethal force, and the immense power of a dying whale could easily damage or even capsize their small vessel. These were not just abstract dangers, they were the realities of the job, and every man who signed on understood the risks he was taking. It was a profession that demanded courage, skill, and a deep trust in one's crewmates. The community on shore was just as vital to the whaling operation. The families of the whalers lived with a constant mix of pride and anxiety. The sound of the factory's steam whistle, signaling the arrival of a whale, was a sound of relief, meaning that a crew was returning safely and that work was available. The women of the community played a crucial role, managing households, raising children, and supporting the social fabric of the town, while the men were at sea or working long shifts at the station. The whaling station was the economic engine, but the community was its heart, providing the resilience and support that made such a demanding way of life possible. In communities like Dildo, South Dildo, and Williamsport, whaling was more than just a job, it was a shared identity. The stories of the hunt were told and retold in kitchens and on fishing stages. Boys grew up watching the catcher boats come and go, dreaming of the day they would be old enough to join a crew. The skills of the trade were passed down from one generation to the next. A successful gunner was a local hero, his skill and bravery a source of pride for the entire community. This shared experience forged a powerful bond among the people, a sense of collective purpose tied directly to the cycles of the hunt and the movements of the great whales. Consider the story of a place like Hawk Harbor in Labrador, which was for a time one of the largest whaling operations in the world. For several months each year, this remote outpost would transform into a bustling hive of activity, drawing workers from all over Newfoundland. The men lived in bunkhouses, working and eating together, forming a tight-knit community in a wild and isolated landscape. Their lives were a stark contrast of grueling, bloody work during the day and simple camaraderie in the evenings. These personal stories of the individuals who risked their lives and the families they supported are the human core of Newfoundland's whaling history, reminding us that behind the industry were people simply trying to make a living from the sea. The efficiency of 20th century whaling, with its powerful ships and explosive harpoons, came at a tremendous cost. For decades, the industry thrived, and the number of whales processed at Newfoundland stations seemed to suggest a limitless resource. Catcher boats brought in fin, sei, minke, and even the colossal blue whale, the largest animal ever to have lived on Earth. The shore stations operated at full capacity, turning these magnificent creatures into oil, meat, and fertilizer with industrial precision. From the perspective of a small outport community, this boom seemed like a permanent feature of their economy, a reliable source of prosperity drawn from the cold waters of the Atlantic. However, the ocean is not limitless. The very technology that made the hunt so successful also made it unsustainable. The rate at which whales were being killed far outpaced their ability to reproduce. Whale populations, which had evolved over millions of years, simply could not withstand such intense and relentless pressure. By the mid-20th century, the signs of decline were becoming undeniable. The catcher boats had to travel farther and farther from shore to find their prey. The average size of the whales being caught began to shrink, a clear indication that the older, larger animals were becoming scarce. The once abundant pods of great whales were thinning out. The whalers themselves were the first to notice the change. The old hands on the catcher boats could remember a time when the ocean seemed full of whales, their spouts visible in every direction. Now they spent days searching for a single animal. The hunt became less of a certainty and more of a gamble. This decline was not just a local phenomenon, it was happening in whaling grounds all around the world. The global populations of many great whale species, particularly the blue whale and the right whale, were pushed to the very brink of extinction. The engine of the industry was running out of fuel. This depletion was driven by a global market that demanded ever-increasing quantities of whale products. But as scientific understanding of whale biology grew, so too did a global awareness of the unfolding crisis. Scientists began to sound the alarm, presenting data that showed catastrophic declines in whale numbers. This growing body of evidence led to the formation of the International Whaling Commission in 1946, an organization initially created to manage the whale stocks for the industry's benefit. However, as the crisis deepened, its focus slowly began to shift from managing the hunt to conserving the whales, marking the beginning of a profound change in humanity's relationship with these animals. The decline in whale populations had a direct and devastating impact on the whaling industry in Newfoundland. As whales became harder to find, the profitability of the shore stations plummeted. The costs of fuel, maintenance, and crew wages remained high, but the returns diminished with each passing season. A station that once processed dozens of whales a year might now struggle to secure even a handful. The economic foundation upon which so many communities had been built began to crumble. The industry that had once seemed so robust was now facing its own extinction, not from a lack of demand, but from a lack of whales. This economic reality was compounded by a powerful shift in public attitudes. By the 1960s and 70s, a global environmental movement was gaining momentum. Organizations like Greenpeace, which famously launched its first anti-whaling campaigns off the coast of British Columbia, brought the plight of the whales into living rooms around the world. The image of the intelligent, gentle giant being hunted with explosive harpoons sparked public outrage. Whales were no longer seen merely as a resource to be harvested. They were increasingly viewed as magnificent and sentient creatures deserving of protection. This changing perception put immense pressure on whaling nations to end the practice. For the people in Newfoundland's whaling communities, this was a difficult and confusing time. The work that had provided for their families for generations was now being condemned by a world that seemed very far away. To them, whaling was not an act of cruelty, but a difficult and necessary job, a tradition passed down from their fathers and grandfathers. They were whalers, not because they disliked whales, but because it was the way they made a living in a harsh environment with few alternatives. The end of whaling meant the loss of jobs, the loss of a way of life, and the loss of a core part of their community's identity. The final blow came in 1972, when the Canadian government imposed a moratorium on all commercial whaling in its waters. The last of Newfoundland's shore stations, which had already been struggling for years, were forced to close their doors for good. The steam whistles fell silent. The flensing slipways, once slick with oil and activity, were left to rot. The catcher boats were sold for scrap or abandoned in quiet coves. For the outports that had depended on the industry, the end of whaling was a profound economic and cultural shock, forcing them to look for new ways to survive and redefining their relationship with the ocean once again. Today, the physical remnants of Newfoundland's whaling industry are slowly being reclaimed by nature. The old shore stations are now quiet ruins, their foundations overgrown with grass and their machinery rusting in the salt-laced air. Yet, the memory of that era persists, woven into the cultural landscape of the island. It lives on in the names of places like Dildo Arm and the town of South Dildo, names that are believed to have originated from a part of the old wooden pin used to lock an oar in place on a whaling boat. These names are echoes of a time when the language of whaling was part of everyday life, a reminder of the industry that once dominated these shores. Museums and interpretive centers across the province now serve as custodians of this complex history. In places like the Red Bay National Historic Site, visitors can see the remarkably preserved artifacts of the 16th century Basque whalers, a testament to the earliest chapter of this story. At other local museums, you can find the tools of the 20th century hunt, a massive harpoon head, a long-handled flensing knife, or photographs of the men who worked the stations. These exhibits do not glorify the hunt, rather, they seek to explain it, to provide context for a way of life that is now difficult for many to comprehend. They tell the story of the people, their ingenuity, and their hardships. The legacy of whaling also survives in the oral traditions of the outports. While the last generation of whalers is now passing, their stories have been recorded, preserving first-hand accounts of the hunt. These are tales of incredible bravery, of close calls with massive whales, and of the unique camaraderie that existed among the crews. They speak of the smell of the factory, the taste of whale meat, and the economic security that the industry provided. These personal narratives are invaluable, offering a human perspective that statistics and historical documents cannot capture. They remind us that this history is not just about an industry, but about the lives of thousands of individuals. Remembering this past is not about being nostalgic for the hunt. It is about understanding the full, complex story of Newfoundland's relationship with the sea. It is an acknowledgement of how communities adapted to their environment and how their survival was once tied to the pursuit of these magnificent creatures. This history serves as a powerful lesson about the consequences of overexploitation and the importance of sustainability. By preserving the memory of the whaling era, Newfoundland honors the difficult choices its people faced and carries forward the lessons learned from the emptying of the oceans, ensuring that the mistakes of the past are not forgotten. The same ocean that once supported a thriving whaling industry in Newfoundland now supports a very different kind of enterprise. The relationship between people and whales has undergone a profound transformation. The hunter's boat has been replaced by the tourist vessel, and the harpoon has been replaced by the camera. Today, Newfoundland is celebrated as one of the best places in the world to watch whales. The very creatures that were once hunted to the brink of extinction have become a symbol of the region's natural beauty and a cornerstone of its modern tourism economy. This new industry represents a story of hope and renewal. Each year, from late spring to early autumn, the waters off the Newfoundland coast come alive. Humpback minke and fin whales return to these rich feeding grounds, drawn by the abundance of capelin and other small fish. Tourists from around the globe now flock to coastal towns, eager for the chance to witness these gentle giants in their natural habitat. Tour boat operators, many of whom are former fishers with an intimate knowledge of the sea, guide visitors to the best viewing spots. The sight of a 40-ton humpback whale launching its entire body out of the water is an experience of pure wonder, creating a connection to nature that is both powerful and peaceful. This new whale-based economy provides a sustainable alternative for the very communities that once depended on the hunt. It creates jobs for boat captains, guides, and staff in local hotels, restaurants, and gift shops. It demonstrates that living whales can be far more valuable over the long term than dead ones. This shift reflects a deeper change in our understanding of the natural world. Conservation efforts, both local and international, have been crucial in allowing whale populations to slowly recover. Sanctuaries and marine protected areas help to safeguard the critical habitats that whales need to feed, breed, and raise their young. The journey of the whale in Newfoundland's story is a remarkable one. It is a journey from resource to icon, from commodity to cherished natural wonder. While the populations of some species, like the blue whale, remain dangerously low, the recovery of others, like the humpback, is a testament to what is possible when we choose conservation over exploitation. The sight of a whale's fluke disappearing beneath the waves is no longer a signal for the hunt to begin. Instead, it is a moment of awe, a symbol of a healthier ocean and a more balanced relationship between humanity and the great creatures of the deep. It is a new chapter for Newfoundland, one written not with harpoons, but with a shared sense of wonder and respect.